The smell of burnt toast drifted through the quiet kitchen, curling around the corners of the wooden cabinets like a silent reminder that Jason wasn't built for mornings like this. He waved a dish towel at the smoke alarm before it started beeping, his tie hanging loose around his neck, his white shirt wrinkled at the cuffs. He was running late. Again. At the kitchen table, Elijah sat with his chin in his hands, watching his dad with soft, tired eyes. His backpack was already on, slightly too big for his narrow shoulders. A small cartoon lunchbox sat in front of him, unopened. He didn't say a word, just followed his father's every movement like a child used to waiting. Jason finally gave up on the toast and tossed it in the trash. He popped open a cereal box, filled a bowl halfway, then added milk. "Here you go, champ," he said, placing the bowl in front of Elijah with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thanks, Daddy." Jason ruffled his son's thick curls and sighed. "Big day today. Math quiz, right?" Elijah nodded, already spooning the cereal quietly into his mouth. Jason crouched beside him, trying not to notice the dark circles under his son's eyes or the way his shoulders slumped. Elijah was only 8, but sometimes he looked older than Jason felt. There was a weight to him, a quiet patience, that hurt to see in someone so small. "I'm flying out tonight," Jason said gently. "I'll only be gone 4 days. Miss Patterson will pick you up from school, and you'll stay with Grandma Ruth on the weekend, all right?" Elijah paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. "Can't I come with you?" Jason smiled, but his chest tightened. "I wish you could, but this one's really boring. Grown-up stuff. Meetings. No fun." The boy gave a small nod and went back to eating. Jason stood and turned away so his son wouldn't see the look on his face. He didn't like leaving him. It never got easier. But business called, and the business didn't care that he was a single dad or that his son still had nightmares if the moonlight wasn't on. Amanda would have known what to do. He thought about her often, especially in moments like this, morning chaos, little shoes by the door, missing socks, and cereal that somehow always ended up on the floor. Amanda had made it all feel easy. She used to hum when she folded laundry, dance in the kitchen with Elijah in her arms, laugh so hard she cried during movie nights. But Amanda was gone, taken by childbirth complications that came out of nowhere, leaving him with a newborn in one arm and silence in the other. For the last 8 years, Jason had been doing his best. Some days were better than others. Most days were just survival. He straightened his tie, checked the clock, and grabbed his briefcase. "Come on, let's get you to school." They moved together like a team. Elijah knew the drill. Grabbed the lunchbox, double-checked the backpack, locked the door behind them. In the car, Jason played the same radio station they always listened to, and Elijah stared out the window quiet. Jason glanced at him at a red light. "You okay, buddy?" Elijah nodded. "Yeah. You sure?" Another nod. Still staring out the window. Jason wanted to say more. Wanted to ask if the boy still missed Amanda, or if the new house felt like home yet, or if he was really okay staying with Ruth and Miss Patterson again this weekend. But the light turned green, and the question stayed stuck in his throat. At the school drop-off lane, Jason leaned over and kissed his son's forehead. "Be good. Make me proud." "I will." Elijah got out of the car, his backpack bouncing against his back. He turned once, gave a small wave, then walked into the building. Jason stayed parked for a moment, watching the doors close behind his son. He rubbed his forehead, then started the engine. He didn't know that in a few short months, everything would change. That the woman he'd let into their lives, into Elijah's life, would not be who she seemed. For now, it was still just the two of them, and Jason thought that was enough. The first time Jason met her, he wasn't even looking. It was at a fundraising dinner for a local children's hospital. One of those well-dressed events filled with polite small talk, silver cutlery, and people sipping wine they couldn't pronounce. Jason had been invited by a business partner, mostly out of obligation. His tie was too tight, and his mind was still on Elijah's science project. Something about volcanoes and baking soda. When she walked over to his table, she had a quiet confidence, the kind that made people pause and listen. Her dress was a deep burgundy, simple but elegant. Her smile was easy. Her eyes were the kind that studied a room before stepping into it. "Jason Bennett, right?" she said, holding out her hand. He stood and shook it politely. "Yes. And you are?" "Rachel Moore. I think our sons go to the same school. My son Marcus is in the grade above yours." That caught his attention. They spoke for 20 minutes before dinner was served. then again during dessert. She was divorced, left her husband when Marcus was 5, said she knew what it meant to raise a child alone. She didn't pity him. She didn't gush or tiptoe around Amanda's name. That was rare. The next morning, she sent an email through the school's parent network, thanking him for the conversation. It was short, friendly. He replied. Then she replied. Then they met for coffee. Then lunch. And by the end of the month, she and Marcus came over for dinner. Elijah was shy at first. He clung to Jason's side, peeking out behind his arm like a rabbit afraid of the sun. Marcus, tall for his age and always a little serious, gave a nod and sat quietly on the couch while Rachel made conversation. I hope this isn't too weird for Elijah, Rachel said, watching the boy carefully. I know it's a big shift. Jason appreciated that. She wasn't pushy. She didn't try to hug Elijah. She didn't treat him like a project. Instead, she helped with the dishes and let Marcus share his math workbook, like he was offering a peace token. Over the next few weeks, Rachel found ways to be present. Not too much, just enough. She'd swing by with home-cooked meals on evenings Jason worked late. She'd offer to take Elijah and Marcus to the park after school. When Elijah had a cough, she sent over ginger tea and cough drops, saying her grandmother always swore by it. Jason started to relax. And others noticed too. You seem lighter, his sister Vanessa said one Sunday afternoon as they sat on the porch. Like, you're breathing again. Jason shrugged but didn't disagree. He hadn't thought he was ready for someone new. But Rachel didn't feel like someone new. She felt like a woman who understood the weight he carried. And maybe, just maybe, wanted to help carry it with him. One chilly Saturday morning, Rachel and Marcus joined them at the zoo. Elijah clung to Jason's hand most of the way, but when they reached the penguin exhibit, he surprised everyone by tugging Marcus's sleeve and asking if he liked them too. Marcus gave a small nod. They're okay. Elijah smiled. It wasn't wide, but it was real. That night, Jason tucked Elijah into bed and sat on the edge of the mattress longer than usual. She's nice, he said carefully. Rachel. Elijah's eyes were half closed, but he nodded. She smells like cinnamon. Jason chuckled. She does. A pause. Are you going to marry her? Jason's heart stuttered. He smoothed his son's covers. Do you want me to? Elijah didn't answer. He looked at the ceiling and whispered. Can I still have my moonlight? Jason smiled sadly. Always. 2 months later, he proposed. It wasn't fireworks and candles. Jason wasn't that kind of man. But it was thoughtful. Private. He took her to the same bench they'd sat on during their third date, overlooking the river. The same place she'd first told him about Marcus. He handed her a simple box, looked her in the eyes, and said, Let's do this together. She said yes. They got married in the spring. Nothing grand. A small garden ceremony with Elijah and Marcus as ring bearers. Elijah wore a gray suit and kept his hands clenched in nervous fists. Jason noticed. He kept catching him glancing around, like he was waiting for something, or someone, to change their mind. But the ceremony ended with smiles, photos, cake, even laughter. Everyone said it was the beginning of something beautiful. And for a while, Jason believed it too. The house filled with new sounds. Marcus's heavier footsteps down the hall, Rachel's voice humming as she cleaned, the dryer beeping with bigger loads of laundry. Elijah's room was moved. Jason didn't notice how far down the hallway it was now. He was traveling more. Now that things were settled, he told himself it was safe to take longer trips, to push the business further. Rachel had things handled. The boys were doing fine. He left emergency numbers on the fridge, hugged Elijah tight before every trip, and called every night from hotel rooms across the country. Each time, Elijah picked up the phone with a quiet voice and said everything was fine. Everything was not fine, but Jason didn't know that yet. Elijah sat on the edge of his new bed, legs dangling, backpack still strapped to his shoulders. The room was smaller than his old one, just wide enough for a twin bed, a small dresser, and a dusty corner lamp. There were no glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling here. No bookshelf with his dinosaur encyclopedias. No window view. Just beige walls, the smell of laundry soap, and the low hum of the washing machine in the hallway. Rachel had said the switch was temporary. We're just adjusting the space, she'd smiled. It makes more sense for Marcus to be closer to the bathroom. Jason had nodded. It did make sense. Marcus was older. He had schoolwork that kept him up late. He needed the quieter room. Elijah hadn't said a word. That night, Rachel came to his doorway but didn't step inside. Lights out by 8. And don't make a mess in here. This used to be the laundry room, and I won't have it smelling like a locker. She didn't wait for him to answer. The light snapped off. The door closed. Elijah pulled his blanket to his chin and reached for the small plug-in moon light he kept under the bed. It didn't work. The bulb was missing. The first time Rachel raised her voice, it was over spilled juice. Elijah had accidentally tipped over his cup at breakfast. It soaked the corner of the tablecloth and dripped onto Marcus's cereal box. "You clumsy child," she snapped, grabbing a towel and slamming it onto the mess. "Can't you sit still for 5 minutes?" Jason had already left for the airport that morning. Elijah froze in his chair, throat tightening. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Marcus didn't even blink. He just kept eating, spoon scraping loudly against his bowl. Rachel tossed the soaked cloth in the sink, then turned back with a forced smile. "Clean it up, and don't expect waffles tomorrow. You'll get toast. Dry toast." Elijah cleaned up quickly and ate the rest of his food in silence. When Jason called that night, Elijah said the waffles were yummy. It got worse when his father wasn't around. Rachel rarely yelled during the day. She saved that for the evenings, after she locked the front door and closed the blinds like she was sealing in a secret. She would criticize his posture, mock his reading voice during homework, and compare everything he did to Marcus. "Why can't you be smart like him? Look at how neatly he writes. You always ask dumb questions. Use your head for once. You're not a baby anymore. Grow up." Marcus mimicked her when she wasn't watching. He'd take Elijah's favorite pencil and snap it. Hide one sock. Turn off the bathroom light while he was still inside. Once, when Elijah forgot to bring in the mail, Rachel made him kneel on the cold tile floor of the entryway for nearly half an hour. "This is what happens when you don't listen," she said, arms folded. When Marcus walked past, he grinned and whispered, "You look stupid." At school, Elijah said nothing. He still raised his hand in class, still got good grades. But his smile became harder to find. His drawings became darker. Trees without leaves, stick figures standing alone in the rain. His teacher, Mrs. Long, made a note to speak with someone, but the semester ended too fast. At home, Rachel perfected her mask. She cooked dinner on Sundays. She made Marcus set the table and called Elijah to join, pretending everything was normal. "Say grace," she'd say sweetly. "We're a family now." Jason would sit at the head of the table, watching with hopeful eyes. He didn't see how Elijah flinched when Rachel reached across him. He didn't catch Marcus's quiet kicks under the table. Sometimes Elijah wondered if maybe it was his fault. Maybe he was too quiet, too clumsy. Maybe if he tried harder, cleaned better, answered faster, Rachel would stop being mad. But nothing ever changed. And he never had the courage to speak up. Because one night, when Jason had called and asked if Elijah was doing okay, Rachel stood in the doorway after the call ended. She didn't speak at first, just stared at him with a look that felt colder than ice. Then she leaned in and whispered, "If you ever tell him anything, I'll send you away. You'll live in a home for boys who cry too much. Is that what you want?" Elijah shook his head quickly, tears pooling in his eyes. "Then keep your mouth shut." Jason saw none of it. He believed Rachel. She sent him pictures of the boys doing homework together. She told him Elijah was shy, still grieving, and it might take time for him to bond. She said she was patient, said she loved both boys equally. She told him what he needed to hear. And he, being too tired, too trusting, too far away, believed it. It wasn't until the night flight delay, the missed connection, and the decision to drive home unexpectedly that Jason would finally see the truth. But that night hadn't come yet. And so the mask stayed on. And Elijah stayed quiet. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks folded into months. On the surface, everything seemed steady, routine. But inside Elijah, something was quietly coming undone. He smiled less, spoke even less. At school, he walked with his head down, hugging his backpack to his chest like a shield. He ate his lunch alone under the shade of the big tree behind the playground, where the noise of the other kids couldn't reach him. When someone called his name, he jumped a little before answering. "Elijah," his teacher, Mrs. Long, said one Friday morning after class, crouching beside his desk. "You forgot to finish the drawing we started yesterday." Elijah glanced at the blank paper, then at the pack of colored pencils on the edge of his desk. "I'll do it later," he murmured. "You used to love art," she said softly. He nodded without meeting her eyes. She watched him closely. Is everything okay at home, sweetheart? Elijah tensed. I'm fine, he said quickly. Just tired. Mrs. Long didn't believe him, but she also didn't want to push too hard. She had seen this before, kids who were always fine, until it was too late. She decided she would call the counselor again. Maybe next week. Maybe Monday. But Monday came, and there was a substitute. And by Tuesday, she had a pile of papers to grade and a parent-teacher meeting to prep for. Elijah faded back into silence, tucked neatly between lesson plans and report cards. No one noticed how fast he flinched when someone raised their voice. No one noticed how he stopped drawing altogether. Not even Jason. Jason was traveling more now. Rachel had encouraged it. You've built this company from the ground up, she said one night as they lay in bed. You deserve to grow it. You don't need to worry about us. We've got this handled. He kissed her shoulder and smiled. You really mean that? Of course. You've done more than enough. So he booked longer trips, more conferences, networking dinners, and client retreats. He made sure to call Elijah every evening, but the calls had grown shorter. Elijah always answered the same way. Dabdi. Sean. How was school? It was okay. You being good for your stepmom? Yes. And that was usually it. Jason told himself it was normal. Boys Elijah's age weren't talkative. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he was adjusting. But deep inside, something gnawed at him. Something he didn't have the words to name. One Sunday afternoon, Elijah sat in the back seat of Rachel's SUV as she drove them to Marcus's basketball practice. He had his tablet on his lap, but he wasn't playing. He was staring out the window, his small hand resting motionless on the screen. From the front seat, Marcus whispered something to his mom and snickered. Rachel looked at the mirror. What's wrong with your face? Are you crying? Elijah quickly wiped his cheek with his sleeve. No. Then sit up straight and stop looking like that. You're lucky you even get to come with us. Marcus snickered again. Elijah turned his face back to the window and said nothing. The next day at school, he failed his spelling test. Mrs. Long placed the paper on his desk, the red marks circling the errors like wounds. Elijah stared at it for a long time, then folded it in half and stuffed it into his backpack. She watched him from across the room, frowning. Elijah, can I speak with you after class? He froze. Did something happen? He shook his head. Is someone bothering you? Again, he shook his head. Would you like to talk to someone? The school counselor, maybe? He looked down at his hands and whispered, No, thank you. That afternoon, when Rachel picked him up, he climbed into the car and sat in silence. She didn't ask him how school went. She didn't ask anything at all. One night, Rachel left him outside. It had been a chilly evening. The sky was overcast and the wind bit at his skin. Elijah had gone to take out the trash, like she asked. When he returned, the door was locked. He knocked once, then twice, then a third time harder. No answer. He tried the doorbell. Nothing. From inside, he could hear faint laughter. Rachel on the phone, maybe. Or Marcus watching TV. He waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. He sat down on the front step, arms around his knees, face buried in his sweater. It was getting dark. Finally, after what felt like forever, the door opened. Rachel stood there holding a glass of wine, her expression bored. What took you so long? I knocked, Elijah said softly. Well, I didn't hear you. Next time, knock louder. She turned and walked back inside. Elijah followed, head down, heart pounding. When Jason came home that weekend, he noticed his son had a small scratch on his cheek. What happened? He asked. Elijah blinked. The cat. You don't have a cat. Elijah froze. I mean at school. They brought one for show and tell. Jason frowned. The lie was clumsy. But Elijah smiled quickly, and it was the kind of smile that said, please don't ask more. So he didn't. He kissed the top of his son's head, gave him a small smile, and told himself it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. It was a cry for help. But no one heard it. Not yet. Jason's flight had been canceled. A heavy storm grounded all outbound planes in Chicago, and after hours of waiting in the terminal, tired, frustrated, and unable to book a new ticket before morning, he decided to do what he rarely did: rent a car and drive home. It was just past 9 p.m. when he crossed into the neighborhood. Rain tapped lightly against the windshield, and the streetlights cast long shadows over the quiet cul-de-sac. His house stood in the corner lot, 2 stories tall with porch lights dimmed and curtains drawn. It looked peaceful from the outside, but something tugged at him. There were no signs of life. No TV flickering from the living room. No sound from the upstairs window where Elijah usually played audiobooks before bed. Jason parked in the driveway and cut the engine. He didn't text. Didn't call. He figured he'd surprise them. He missed his boy. He reached for his suitcase, but stopped when he noticed something small near the porch steps. A figure, curled up, alone. His heart stilled. Jason threw open the door and ran into the rain. Elijah! The little boy flinched. He was sitting on the edge of the porch, knees pulled tightly to his chest, head down. His jacket was soaked. His socks were wet. His small body shivered under the weight of the cold. Elijah! Jason dropped beside him. What are you doing out here? What happened? Elijah's head lifted slowly. His eyes were red. His lips trembled. I was taking out the trash, he whispered, barely audible. She forgot I was outside. Jason stared at him. For how long? I don't know. Jason stood and pounded on the front door, rage building like a firestorm in his chest. The door creaked open after a few seconds. Rachel stood in her robe, holding a mug of tea. She blinked. Jason, what the hell is going on? He barked. Why was my son outside alone in the cold? She stiffened. It must have been a misunderstanding. I didn't know. A misunderstanding? He's freezing, sitting out there like a stray dog. You forgot him. Jason stormed past her and wrapped Elijah in a dry towel from the bathroom. His hands were shaking. He had never yelled like that, not even during boardroom battles. He had never felt this kind of rage. Not until now. Rachel followed him into the kitchen. Jason, you're overreacting. Overreacting? He could have gotten sick. Or scared. Or worse. He went out without telling me. I thought he was upstairs with Marcus. Jason turned sharply. Stop lying. Her mouth opened. Closed. Then, in a more controlled tone, she said, I've taken care of him the best I could. Jason studied her, and for the first time really looked. The calm voice, the gentle tone, it all seemed rehearsed now. Thin. Hollow. Like paper stretched over a hole. Go upstairs, he told her coldly. We'll talk in the morning. Rachel opened her mouth to protest, but something in his expression silenced her. She turned and left without another word. Jason sat on the edge of the bed beside Elijah that night. The boy had changed into warm pajamas and was holding his favorite stuffed dinosaur against his chest like a lifeline. Do you want to talk to me, buddy? Jason asked gently. Tell me what's been happening. Elijah's eyes welled with tears. Will you be mad? No, Jason said softly. Never at you. I promise. Elijah hesitated. Then the dam broke. She yells at me, he whispered. All the time. When you're gone, she calls me names. Says I'm dumb. She makes me kneel on the floor sometimes. And she tells me if I say anything, you'll leave me too. Jason's heart shattered. He reached for his son and pulled him into his arms, holding him tightly, protectively, as if he could undo every wound, every insult, every silent night the boy had spent afraid. I'm so sorry, Jason whispered, tears in his eyes. I should have seen it. I should have known. Elijah sobbed into his shirt. I didn't want to make you sad. I just wanted you to be happy. Jason kissed the top of his son's head. You are my happiness, Elijah. You. Nothing else matters. They stayed like that for a long time, father and son, heart to heart, healing. The next morning, Rachel came downstairs, dressed and trying to act normal. Jason was waiting at the kitchen table. We need to talk, he said without looking up from his coffee. Rachel tried to smile. Look, I didn't mean to. He raised a hand. I'm done. She froze. I'm done believing your words. I'm done letting you near my child. I should have listened to my gut. But I won't make that mistake again. Her eyes narrowed. You're overreacting. No. I'm waking up. Get your things. I want you out of this house by tonight. You can't. I can. And I will. Rachel stared at him, face twisting with rage. You're throwing away everything, for a child who can't even speak up for himself? Jason stood slowly. Calm. Firm. I'm choosing my son, he said. Something you clearly never did. By nightfall, Rachel and Marcus were gone. Jason stood at the window as they pulled away. He didn't speak. Just watched the headlights vanish down the street, like a chapter being finally closed. Then he turned to find Elijah sitting on the staircase, small arms wrapped around his knees. Come here, Jason said gently. Elijah ran into his arms. And for the first time in a long time, the house felt right again. The house was quiet, not the kind of silence that wrapped around you like a warm blanket, but the kind that felt honest, safe, free from the sharp edges of whispered threats, fake smiles, and locked doors. It had been 5 days since Rachel and Marcus left. 5 days since Jason sent them away with no room for second chances. 5 days of breathing again. Jason sat on the couch with Elijah nestled under his arm. They were watching an old cartoon they used to love, something with goofy animals and silly voices. But tonight, it wasn't just background noise. It was comfort, familiar, like slipping back into something that had always fit. "Daddy," Elijah said suddenly. Boo. "Can I sleep in your room again tonight?" Jason looked down and kissed the top of his son's head. "For as long as you want." Elijah smiled. A real one this time. Small but bright. The next morning, Jason made pancakes from scratch. He burnt the first few and nearly dropped a bottle of syrup, but Elijah didn't mind. He laughed, and Jason laughed with him. It was the kind of morning that reminded them both of who they used to be, before everything changed. Later that day, Jason called the school. He asked to speak with Mrs. Long. She didn't sound surprised to hear from him. "I was hoping you'd call," she said gently. "I've been worried about Elijah for some time now." Jason closed his eyes. "Why didn't you say anything?" "I tried. But children like Elijah, they hide things so well. And you always looked like someone who cared. I didn't want to accuse anyone without proof." Jason's voice tightened. "You had every right to. I should have seen it." "You saw it now," she said softly. "That matters." Jason also called his lawyer. The house was in his name. The accounts were untouched. But just to be safe, he made everything airtight. No contact. No shared property. No strings. He didn't want Rachel to have any path back into their lives. She tried, of course. She sent a long message 3 days after leaving. Something about misunderstanding, apologies, second chances. She said Marcus missed Elijah. She said she missed being a family. Jason didn't respond. He blocked her number and deleted the message. There was no room in his life for people who hurt his son. That Friday, Jason sat Elijah down after dinner. They sat at the kitchen table, the one with syrup stains from breakfast and scratch marks from years of crayon doodles. "I want to talk to you about something," he said carefully. "Something important." Elijah looked up with wide eyes. "You never have to pretend again," Jason said. "Not with me. If something hurts you, if someone hurts you, you tell me. Always. No matter what." Elijah nodded slowly. "I know I should have known what was going on," Jason continued. "And I'm sorry I didn't. That's on me." The boy stared at his plate, then whispered, "I was scared." "I know, buddy. And I'm going to do better. From now on, it's just me and you. We're a team, okay?" Elijah nodded again, and this time he didn't look away. He reached out and slid his small hand into Jason's. "I love you, Daddy." Jason squeezed his son's hand gently. "I love you more than anything in this world." In the weeks that followed, things slowly shifted. Elijah began smiling more. He raised his hand in class again. He started drawing, bright pictures this time. Superheroes, dinosaurs, a house with a big sun over it, and 2 stick figures on the porch. Just 2. Jason saw it taped to the fridge one afternoon and stood staring at it for a long time. People who knew Jason noticed a change too. At the office, he didn't work late as often. He turned down back-to-back trips. He stopped chasing deals that took him away more than they brought him home. He picked Elijah up from school himself most days now. They'd get ice cream or sit in the park. Sometimes they just walked in silence, fingers loosely linked, as if both of them needed to know the other was still there. And at night, when the house got quiet and the lights went off, Jason no longer worried about what he was missing, because he was home, finally home. One night, as Elijah was drifting off to sleep, he whispered, "I'm not scared anymore." Jason, sitting in the chair by his bed, blinked. "What do you mean?" "I don't have to keep secrets," he said, eyes fluttering closed. "I don't have to pretend." Jason's heart swelled with pride and pain all at once. He reached for the small moon light beside the bed, plugged it in, and watched it glow softly. "You never did," he said gently. "And you never will again." The end of pretending had come, and in its place a beginning. A father who listened, a boy who healed, and a home built on truth. 6 months later, the summer sun filtered gently through the windows, painting golden streaks across the living room floor. Jason stood in the kitchen, flipping pancakes while music played low from a speaker on the counter. The same song Amanda used to hum on Saturday mornings. But this wasn't a house frozen in the past anymore. This was a home that had healed. He glanced over his shoulder and smiled. Elijah sat at the table, barefoot, with his head tilted as he concentrated on building a small city out of Legos. His curls had grown fuller. His cheeks had color again. And his eyes, they were alive. "Daddy," Elijah said without looking up, "if I build a hospital, can we make a sign that says no mean people allowed?" Jason chuckled. "Absolutely. Make that the first rule of your city." The boy grinned. They had come a long way. After Rachel and Marcus left, Jason took a hard look at his life. He stepped down temporarily from his position at the company. He handed the reins to a trusted partner and decided to focus on what mattered most: Elijah. It wasn't a decision the board understood, but he didn't owe them anything. He owed his son. They started therapy together, not because Elijah asked for it, but because Jason wanted to give him a space where he could speak freely, without fear. The first few sessions were quiet, but over time Elijah opened up. He talked about the night he was locked outside. He talked about the threats, the comparisons, the way Marcus would snatch things and laugh when no one stopped him. Jason sat in silence during most of those sessions, his fists clenched, shame heavy on his chest. But Elijah never blamed him. And that was what broke Jason the most. They also traveled, just the two of them. Road trips to the countryside. Long walks in national parks. Jason made good on every promise he had postponed. They built memories out of new experiences instead of pain. One weekend, while roasting marshmallows by a fire pit, Elijah turned to him and asked, "Do you think Mom would be proud of us?" Jason swallowed a lump in his throat. "I think she'd be proud of you," he said, "for how strong you are, for how kind you stayed." "And you?" Elijah asked. Jason paused. "I'm working on it." Elijah leaned his head on his father's shoulder. "You're doing a good job." One day, out of the blue, Rachel tried to reach out again. She sent a letter, handwritten this time. She said she wanted to reconnect, said Marcus had changed, and she hoped maybe Elijah could find it in his heart to forgive. Jason didn't even show it to his son. He read it once, then ripped it in half and threw it away. Forgiveness was one thing. Protection was another. He had promised Elijah that no one would ever make him feel small again. And Jason intended to keep that promise. Now, on this quiet summer morning, with pancakes sizzling and sunlight warming the walls, Jason felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. True peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because it was real. He flipped the last pancake onto Elijah's plate and sat across from him. "Hey," he said, "after breakfast, want to go to the park? I think they're having a kite festival." Elijah's eyes lit up. "Can we fly one too?" "You bet we can. And get ice cream after?" Jason leaned in with a grin. "Now you're pushing it." Elijah laughed, a full, belly-deep laugh that made the walls echo. Jason leaned back in his chair, letting that sound sink deep into his heart. That laugh was his reward. That light in his son's eyes. That was redemption. He had failed once by trusting the wrong person. But he had listened. He had changed. And more importantly, he had shown up. A father's redemption wasn't just in saving his son. It was in choosing him, over and over, every single day.